Unlike many cities, including Spokane, coordinating this remarkable effort to reduce homelessness is led not by the city of Houston or surrounding counties, but by an independent, nonprofit lead agency called the Coalition for Homelessness. Mike Nichols is its CEO, and Jessica Preheim is the Coalition's Vice President for Strategic Planning and Public Affairs. Jessica Preheim, Mike Nichols,
Good to be here.
taking the time. Yeah, really good to have you here. So the Coalition for the Homelessness. You're the big umbrella organization. We've been hearing all about the moving parts, but you're the big umbrella organization. So this is a fitting place for us to end up after 3 days of learning about the system. Maybe you could just take a moment to talk about your background here or previously and what you're doing here.
Yeah, so I have been in Houston since about 2010, 2011. I moved here from actually Buffalo, New York. I was working for the Department of Mental Health out there on housing issues. Before that, I'm from Minneapolis, so I actually drove Zambonis, so not in homelessness. I started out working for the Houston Housing Authority and started their homeless programs when I first moved in here. Went into consulting, worked for Corporation for Supportive Housing, and did consulting around Texas and other cities, and then was senior advisor on homelessness for the city of Houston before coming here. So.
And what years was that? Because we know there was this kind of the last 10 years, a lot has happened. Was it before then or during that
No,
time?
it was right during that time. So I actually came in a really exciting time. So in 2011 is when things really started to change.
Right.
And that is when I really moved into the homeless space with the Housing Authority. And Anise Parker and the CEO of the Housing Authority at the time, Tori Gonzalez, were very, very committed to homelessness. So they allowed me I was with the Housing Authority for 6 years during that period, to really be the liaison with the lead agency of the homeless response system to try to make sure we were all marching in the same direction.
Mm-hmm.
So starting to house homeless individuals, and it was really at that point, it was even working through if it was allowed with HUD,
Right.
but really trying to get that started.
I mean, you really started out in kind of a rough place where HUD had you on a not good list, but that was kind of the beginning of tremendous change towards the good.
Yeah, I mean, it was so bad that at one point we sat down with the VA and the Housing Authority, and we just mapped out how many steps it took for someone to get into housing, and it was 76 steps, and it took us on average over a year
Wow.
to get someone into housing. So that was like our starting point.
You're now in charge of strategic planning for the coalition?
That's correct. Yeah, I am now I'm Vice President of Strategic Planning, so really thinking about how we maximize all of our resources, even when they are limited.
So we know where we are, but we'll talk about where we're going to in a bit. But Mike, you're the CEO.
Well, before I talk about Mike Nichols, I want to talk a minute more about Jessica Preheim.
Okay.
Jessica is typical of our staff here. We have a significant, our executive leadership is long-term. Jessica has more than a decade in homelessness solutions. Sarah Martinez has more than a decade, who's our VP of Development. Anna Roush, who's our VP of Program, more than a decade in homelessness solutions. It's a very impressive group, and I feel very lucky to work with these kinds of, I'd say, brilliant leaders. They're committed to the solutions, they're pragmatic, they're practical, and they have this long history of how to use these very limited resources. So I feel very lucky to have the opportunity to work with Jessica and our other VPs. And Jessica is really unique in that she can braid these complex financial pieces and get people housed.
In case I don't circle back to it, I'm going to build on that because everybody you're talking about has been talking to us for about 3 weeks in the last 3 days that I've been here. And it's astonishing how everybody's been willing to change their schedules and just adapt to our schedule and get in and explain things to us, take huge amounts of time to walk us through the detail. It's almost like they care so much about what other communities are doing with homelessness and not just the city of Houston. It's amazing. So you're the president and CEO.
I would say that's our goal. We see this, we know our goal is to house people.
Right.
We know our goal is to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-reoccurring.
Brief, and non-reoccurring.
That's right. We know our vision is that everyone will have a safe place to call home. Mm-hmm. But we also know it's more than just Harris, Montgomery, and Fort Bend County. We go to Austin, we go to Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York. We think we have a model for other people to look at and to follow. Every city is different, every municipality is different, but there's a model to look at. And that's one of the things we'd like to talk about today is what this model is and the success we've had.
Well, let's go through that just before we even get started there. Are people following? You've getting to get a lot of visitors like us. So what about other cities in Texas even, or like San Antonio, Dallas, Austin? Are they?
You want to answer about Austin, then I'll come back.
I think we work as peers, but the state is so large; it's almost like another state away at
Yeah,
times.
right? Yeah, it is.
So I think we're always, we work with our balance of state a lot here. We have good relationships with our other COCs. Not all of them. We just don't know each other because it's so big. But we always, share partnerships, and it's been really interesting in the past few years to see some of the cities really taking steps forward that looks similar to ours. I think Dallas is starting to really make some shifts here in how they're approaching, kind of collective change. Austin, Echo, there's great COC, balance of state. I think something that's unique about Texas is every city is so different that it's very unique. I've worked in many other areas of the country, and it's almost like every city is its own little country or own little state, its own little world. I say country actually intentionally because it's a little different.
Yeah, right. One thing that's really unique, and I haven't taken a lot of time to look at it, but I've seen quite a few graphs, and that's a world I'm comfortable with. And you don't have to be real technical to see your graph looks like this, and every major city, including those in Texas, appears to be going like this. Certainly our own city of Spokane is having that difficulty with increasing homeless population, not going the right direction. You've decreased it approximately 60% over the last 10 years. And as far as I know, you have the lowest per capita housing population of any major city in the U.S. So hey, let's get back to what are you doing that's creating that kind of outcome, because boy, are we interested.
The Los Angeles Times had a editorial about last month that said, the name of the editorial was "What Los Angeles Could Learn from Houston." And I thought it was a very revealing editorial because it said, here's what Houston is doing. What they said we're doing, and I thought they got it right, is they say that we have a good organizational process. And that's where you have a nonprofit as the lead agency that brings together the city, the county, philanthropy, housing authority, businesses into driving one direction, again, solving.
That's the coalition that you guys
The coalition, where coalition is the lead agency for the continuum of care, and which is this 3-county continuum of care.
And you also head up all the data also.
That's right. So that was the first thing they said. Then they said it was great pragmatism. And I think that's a big issue too. In 2011, I'd like to talk about what happened in 2011, but 2011, many big decisions were made, but one of the most important was that we said that we're going to have a coordinated access into housing. And that means that when a person is experiencing homelessness and they enter the system, it doesn't matter what door they go through, whether it comes through the city, the county, Star of Hope, Search, it doesn't matter. The choice will be they'll get housing based on their vulnerability. And the decision was made that everybody has to go through this coordinated access. Housing will be determined based on vulnerability. Vulnerability, it's difficult to say this, but vulnerability is most likely to die. Half the people who were involved in 2011 said, well, we don't need to do that. We want to put housing on who's going to be most successful. But thanks to philanthropy, the mayor, the city, and they got together and they said, no, we're going to focus on those who are most vulnerable and put them in housing first. And of course, the amazing part is the success rate of over 85% means it was a really good decision.
Right.
And
so the fear is that would somehow not be a success. That these are the people least likely to succeed in housing. Over 85% are succeeding with housing.
And the last thing the Los Angeles Times said is scale. We are the macro houser. That's our system. That's our focus. It's instead of trying to focus on every individual, the service providers are really getting these individuals their help and support. The system is driven toward putting people in supportive housing.
So you keep talking about the system, and I've heard that there's over 100 agencies, for instance, and a lot of other moving parts in the system. And so that kind of collaboration is almost unheard of in any endeavor. So maybe you could just talk a little bit. How did you create that kind of collaboration?
I think in the beginning, we really started to map. We looked at like the resources that are in front of us, and we started to make a conscious decision of being data driven. So I think prior to coordinated access, prior to the COC, I think people were emotionally driven, and the person in front of you drove your actions, and we
Right.
had to really say, we're not judging, we're not judging Project A or Project B or Project C, but we want to make sure that we're efficiently serving people and
Right.
thinking if there's ways to do it better, because it could help you as Agency A, you as Agency B. And some of that was having hard conversations about sometimes people did everything.
Right.
Like agencies did everything. And I think it was having to say, what are you really good at? And how can we shift the things you're not that good at to someone who's really good at them? Like,
So how do you create that? We talked to
The
Tao
space.
yesterday with Search. And she said exactly what you're saying, Jessica. And they shifted and narrowed their model to focus on what they do well. How did you get people to see that?
it was having really honest, intentional, and public conversations. I think we really kind of removed, the behind the scenes. And I would say it really started with the veteran work. It was almost 2 years. We met every single week with an entire room of executives, from the head of the VA to the housing authorities to the COC, our nonprofits, and we just said, we made public and audacious goals, and then we said, how do we have to pivot as a community to meet those goals, and let's just be transparent about it, because you can take a larger risk if you do it as a group. I mean, it's collective. The more people that say, okay, I'm going to jump in the deep end, but I'm doing it with 20 other people and 20
Safety
other
in numbers,
agencies,
yeah.
then you can't plan yourself into nothingness. And I think that's where Houston says, we might not have a polished product right now, but we're going to try it, and we're going to adjust, and we're going to acknowledge that it's very rare we get it right the first time. When we're still going to try, because you only learn by doing.
So you meant a lot, but you also, there was a lot of, it was an action oriented.
In the beginning, we made public goals, and we still do. So we would go and say, hey, we're going to start off with 100 people in 100 days. Then it was 300 people in 100 days.
That was the VA. We heard that from
We
Mayor
did-
Parker.
Yeah, we did that, and now it's what we just said we were going to
We're
7,000.
going to house people within 30 days, and we've been able to do that.
How many people have been housed, say during this magic 10-year period that we keep hearing about? How many people have you housed about, do you suppose?
24,000?
Over 24,000
24,000?
formerly homeless people are in supportive housing.
Wow.
Let me go back to the collaboration that I wanted to
Please,
support.
yeah.
The collaboration. What I found is that it's not something that we did once. It did begin in 2011,
Mm-hmm.
but it is done all the time. It is an ongoing effort of communication, of meetings between all these different entities. Our staff is in meetings all the time. Sometimes that seems frustrating. But our job is to drive that collaboration, drive that idea.
That's what the coalition is driving.
Housing people is the solution to homelessness. And the entities that I think every city needs to look at, philanthropy needs to really buy in. We have a few great foundations who saw systems as the answer. There was a article written in 2016 by the CEO of the Houston Endowment, one of our great private foundations. And the name of the article was, "Philanthropy should not mask bad government." So they begin to think, what is the system? How do we do this as a system to solve this problem? And then Jessica mentioned the nonprofits, that we said you can't do everything. Pick and choose what you do best. And that was a big
Get good
very
at it.
difficult for
Yeah.
these to do that. And finally, government had to say, we're going to fund something, and some things we're going to not fund. And the press is, and has to be done ongoing every year, every time there's a budget, is fund housing, fund supportive housing. Because they can easily get off into these other areas.
Right,
But
right.
once they're committed to funding supportive housing, it's
So housing keeps coming up, but you just use the word fund. And, I think for a lot of people, just like your average citizen, they hear that and they think, we can't, they look around and they say, we can't afford to fix this. But you were talking earlier that, in fact, really taxes didn't go up in the city of Houston to have this incredible decrease in homelessness. That in fact, we were hearing it was a lot more expensive to do nothing. In fact, we heard numbers something in the neighborhood of $97,000 a year on average to have somebody on the streets, but to have somebody housed with services, wraparound services, that it was something more in the neighborhood of $17,000.
Yep.
I was CFO for 18 years, but that's pretty straightforward math.
And give you an example of what happened. Is Harris County had always kind of been a little hands-off on homelessness solutions.
Mhm.
And they had a task force, and they're the ones who came up with this $96,000 per person per year when someone lives on the street. Most of that
Cost
money.
only to the county itself.
That's right. Most
Only
of that
to the
money,
county.
That's right. Emergency health care,
Right?
criminal justice, and cleanup. And that was a big number. That's real taxpayer dollars.
Right.
And we said, here's what we have. Again, for about 17 or 18,000 now, you get the three-legged stool. And I want to make sure we understand what the three-legged stool of supportive housing is. Do you want to do that? Because you're the one who came up with that answer.
Oh, no, I
That
think I took
idea.
it from someone else. But no, it's having the unit you live in, you
Mm-hmm.
keep it affordable with the subsidy, and you have your services. And I think that's one thing. It's very challenging to get all those two aligned together. And I think part of our success is being the matchmaker of all three of those. So
Housing, services.
and a unit, a quality home,
Right.
an actual physical place to live. And all three of those have to. There's been times where, we have one and we don't have the other. And we really, part of our role is to play matchmaker to bring them all together. And we do it daily. I mean, and you can never start something and just put it on autopilot. It's just, when we find that there's issues. It's just, it takes risk, and it takes monitoring, and it takes adjusting. And I think part of what we do too is we're matchmakers for other nonprofits. And with that, I think we've been able to earn trust,
Right.
because it's not an agency's problem, it's a community problem.
Right, right.
And it takes a lot of time to reinforce that and to continue it takes a lot of work to keep that going, but I think that's something that's a lot different here.
I'd like to build out on what Jessica
Yeah,
just said.
yeah.
When we talk about a unit, every time I go home, my wife says, "What about little houses?" And I go, "We are interested in a place with a front door, a lock, a lease, air conditioning, heating, restroom, shower, kitchen, a home that you could stay in for years and years."
What
and
we
years.
all think of as home.
And it's not something temporary. It's not something that you're going to move out of. This is something we really want you to be able to stay there. Then it's the payment for that lease. And again, very often comes from vouchers from the housing authorities. And then it's the,
I just want to see if we could guide it for a sec. I think there's a jumping off point there to talk about, because and maybe you guys disagree with this, but we've heard somewhere where if it's temporary, it's not actually housing.
we'll go to that. Yeah,
Okay, good. I think
That's okay.
that might be a question you interject in there.
I'll interject. Yeah.
It's good.
So when people talk about housing,
Excuse me, and
Yeah,
supportive
sorry.
housing is the third leg. Supportive services is the third leg.
Mhm.
But this is not volunteers. This is paid professionals doing these supportive services. So that's a key element, because some people say, well, just have volunteers do this. No, the system is effective because we have paid professionals doing the support services. We have paid payments for the leases, and we have the real home. It's more than just a house of cards. This is
Right.
really good. And as we just said, that's still less expensive than having people live on
a
the
lot
street.
less expensive. And so you keep talking also, it doesn't sound like the kind of thing where you check it, yeah, we got it done. We fixed it. It's more of a long-term committed management of the situation. It's not going away, it's just ongoing, growing,
Yeah, I mean,
evolving.
I feel like I would love to say there's never going to be homelessness. There's always going to be homelessness because, I feel like we're human in the way our nation's set up. But we want to get to a point where if someone's become homeless, we know who they are. We can identify them and the resources they need to break it. And it's I think that's one of our goals, is how do we get to that spot where it's acknowledging that crises will happen, but we are adept and nimble enough to be able to meet them where they're presenting, figure out what they need, and break that cycle as quickly as possible. And we're always
So
looking
they're
to
all
that.
different. I mean, again, 100 agencies, but it seems as people come in that you're assessing needs and you've got all kinds of services. One solution isn't the other solution, and they're all adapted to the individual. And the service, I think,
Yeah.
housing first, as it's been called, I think the perception of that, just maybe because of the name, is that you put somebody in a house and it gets criticized, saying, like, put somebody in a house that can't succeed. But this is housing with help, with services.
And again, the results that we said are very high. They're 85% since 2011, 90% more recently. But
Wow.
those people who fall out of the system, there are places for them to go. So our partners are not just the folks in this system of housing. There are religious groups and other groups that want to take on, and people in mental health services that want to take on these individuals that may need something different, something extra.
Right.
So they're still in this overall umbrella, overall partnership, but the funding is directed toward this supportive housing.
Wow. So recently, 90% success, meaning if you get somebody into housing and you check back later, much later, they're still in that housing succeeding. But even for that small percent, 10%, you have other alternatives. They don't just fall off the radar.
That's right.
Yeah, I think it's that. I think I always some challenge at times because the way to end homelessness is with housing. And we don't ask people the notion of having to earn a basic right is really hard for me to grasp, because homelessness, we always say that by the time you're homeless, every other system has failed you.
Right.
Like, you've been failed by everything. And I think sometimes they ask us as a homeless response system to fix everything else that's broke. And you can't think about it that way. Like, we have to have intentional conversations with the feeders into homelessness, with the other systems, and think about how it's a mutual benefit for us to house individuals. And, like thinking sobriety requirements at times. If you're living on the streets, and someone says, or sobriety, you need to get a job before you can earn your housing. And you've been there and someone stole your ID, they stole your birth certificate, they stole your social security card. Where do you start? You're not going to be able to get a job. It's just like creates this cycle that people can't break. And I think we
Right.
just try to say, like, we are going to be here to identify how to get you into housing. Once you're in housing, my goodness, you have a door that locks. You could have your ID on your counter and it's there.
Right,
like,
right.
you know where it is. And I think it's just different that way.
And we've
Yeah,
heard.
Just talk about Jerry really quick.
Yeah.
No.
We met a gentleman yesterday, Jerry Hamilton. I don't know if you know him, but he was down at the Beacon, and he not only didn't have an ID, didn't have a birth certificate, and he had medical coordination. He had a lot of issues. He was coming out. He had a 45-year sentence for armed robbery that he committed, I think, as a teen. Served 27 years, but just remarkable. Here he is 1 year out of prison, and he's walking us through his experience at the Beacon and through the system that you are oversight with. And there was a point at which he said, I have two hands, one for helping me and one for helping others. I mean, he's already thinking in those terms, and it's just kind of a remarkable story, and so I guess that's the kind of thing we're talking about, but a lot of coordination at the front end, again, of the many gaps before he went into housing. It was kind of like this navigation center and getting those things done.
I mean, yeah. I always think, like, if I didn't have, we have a provider who said, guess what? I had a housing program in college. Housing program when I was 18. It was called college. Like, we had like those backup supports. But if you don't have it, like, I don't even know where I would start if I didn't have a cell phone. I lost my social security. I lost my birth certificate. And I lost my ID. And I work in this industry. Where do I start? And so I think, like, we're here to really support people in that conversation and that journey, because it's, it's thinking and getting creative, and those tiny little things are almost harder to solve sometimes than finding a unit and keeping someone housed.
Right.
So we've really had to think about our partners, figuring out, working with our Operation ID, working with our police department to print on the spot IDs.
Right.
in the field, we have relationships with our Social Security office now. So we have a single point of contact to be like, all right, we'll accept this police officer printed ID, and we'll get you your temporary Social Security card. Like those small relationships have taken the longest.
Right. I mean, obviously, this is a helping profession that you're involved in, but this sounds like a hard-hitting business conversation in many ways. I mean, you're data-driven. You were with
So I'm a
Cisco
business
for a
guy.
long time.
I'm a business guy, and I
Yeah.
came here after being in business with Cisco Foods and then Grocery Supply, trying to figure out how you market, how you reduce cost. And this is a fiscally responsible activity.
Mhm.
It is both morally and fiscally responsible. I'm lucky I get to work in both of those.
Win-win.
And that's if I was wanting to wave a magic wand. You ask about backgrounds. So I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. And in Birmingham, Alabama during the 60s, what I saw was a failure of the business community, the philanthropic community, the religious community to work together to do the right thing on civil rights. They were just blind to this issue. And in Atlanta, where they weren't blind, Atlanta boomed and prospered. Birmingham did not. And this issue on homelessness is the same kind of issue. You have to look at it, what's good for the city, what's good for your businesses, and when you do that, you also do the right thing.
But you've made that argument successfully because it sounds like business is very much on board with what you're doing here with homelessness.
It's clear. I mean, it is an issue. The downtown management district
They've been a big supporter.
knows.
We
and
talked
they've
to Bob Urey
great support.
yesterday.
They've been a-
Yeah, great conversation.
And they know that as we house people, the value of property goes up. They know that.
Yeah.
And is that just purely monetary? You know Bob Urey. He has a great heart. It's both.
It's both.
You can do both.
It's not either or. It's both
And
Yeah.
government needs to say the same thing. I don't want to move off the topic, but you talked about the feeders, the jails.
Yeah.
We got a call. Catherine Villiar, our communications director, received a call from a for-profit prison in about 3 hours from here, wanting to know what kind of homeless benefits could they could send us, what kind of documents could we send them so they could give it to their people getting out of prison. And of course, we were both infuriated with that idea that that's your answer to the reentry system, because that's the worst answer I could ever imagine. I don't understand why when people get out of prison in the state of Texas, you don't get a valid ID when you walk out the door.
They should be being set up for success.
If you want people to succeed.
Right.
I don't understand why you allow discrimination against people who have coming out of prison on jobs and housing.
Right.
I mean, it is.
You have a felony conviction.
So that's a
boom.
failure in the system. There's
Right.
a failure in the foster care system, same kind of failures. Sadly, we have failures in the education system.
Mhm.
And the homelessness response is really, what's the result? A lot of people look at us and say, oh, there's all this homelessness, what are you going to do about it? We're going to house people.
Yep.
I think too,
Yeah.
though, we set up a system that's structurally different. I think a lot of other cities are starting to look like ours. But we said, okay, if you're a representative of those broken systems, we want you on our steering committee or our board.
Yeah.
Because we want you to hear the issues, and we want you to have some sense of collective responsibility. So our steering committee members, it's pretty large, but it's mainly, we have standing seats with governmental funders, and it's not our board as a lead agency. It's a separate board, and that was intentional. It's making sure that they're invested in the solution, and when you got to vote on it, you need to know what it's about. And so everyone does come to the table, and then, I think that's been another way. We have a long ways to go. But I think the governmental structure also, in 2013, 2011, or 2014, maybe 2012. I don't know. They all blend together. That's really when we set up that kind of separation of church and state. So it was, who is it that we need to think differently, and let's put them on our governing body.
Yeah.
But it's also collective decision making. So we're going to say this is what we all, and one thing that we did to help inform them so they felt invested in this is we also created a really strong work group structure underneath the steering committee, we host and we facilitate every one of the work groups, but every area of concern or new thought has a specific work group, and they're open to our partners to join. And
Wow.
so by the time we bring a vote to the steering committee, we like if we're doing something about, creating a new housing intervention, we invite staffers from, the housing departments, from the justice system to be a part of those work groups. So the steering committee can have a sense of understanding that it's been vetted by the community by the time we ask them to do anything.
So a
And
lot of
it's
communication, a lot of transparency.
over-
That's hard work, but it sounds like it's worth it.
it's over communication.
Can we touch on rapid rehousing is a really, it's not permanent supportive housing.
And you wanted to talk about temporary housing, the concept.
Yeah. The navigation center maybe, and
Well, what is temporary housing?
what is
issues
temporary?
around it?
Yeah.
But I want to get to, I just need something on camera that talks about the importance of market rate housing being affordable as well, or some availability in the system.
Well, maybe we could swing
Set
it
up
up.
with our problem.
Yeah. So one of the problems in Spokane is we've had about a 60% increase in the price of homes in just 2 years. And you're handling strategic planning, you're looking ahead. What are you thinking about? Because I hear the same thing is happening here in Houston, and it's been lower at times, but you're starting to experience the same situation.
I think right now at this point, we are starting to see that, and we're also trying to figure out how to get more system-controlled units. When I say system, it's the homeless response system. So how can we start to think about investments that have more ownership of our nonprofits, so that there's more of an ability to, think about variations in financing, so that they can operate with just rent, and then we bring in services and to keep them more within our, we call it pipeline. So we have a pipeline work group.
Right.
And so we work with we have representation on our pipeline work group from city, counties, and both housing authorities. And we really try to say, hey, these are the resources we have available. How do we target them to this population, and how do we sustain them for a nonprofit, but really making sure that we are that it's contractually obligated for us to send referrals. We try to get as many of those as possible, and I think that's only going to increase. I also think we're going to have to very quickly explore new housing models to us, shared housing. I think that's something we've never done.
What does shared housing look like?
I think it's thinking about having roommate situations.
Yeah.
Being able to utilize larger units, but I think the difference is we want everyone to have tenant protection. So we need everyone in that unit to have a lease in their own name.
Right.
That's a big thing. We're very big on tenant protection. That's why temporary housing is challenging for us, because kind of that transitional concept that your housing is based on. I think your housing should be based on your ability to maintain the terms of your lease. If you can do that, that's really what matters. We're
Right.
here to support someone in that. So
Right.
I think it's thinking more creatively, though, about some different housing models that I think we haven't needed to try.
So it's evolving. You're
Oh, yeah.
You're looking ahead.
Oh.
You're seeing changing.
Yeah.
Things are always changing.
So
but
there
you're
was
evolving.
we had a great opportunity, especially when COVID started, because we didn't have a very high occupancy rate in Houston. It was 70-80% occupancy. And so once we had the financials to do the vouchers for the services, we could house a lot of people. And that's when we did this significant housing over the last year.
Right.
The 7,000. That was significant. As the year moved on, this occupancy rate got higher and higher and higher, partly because of the good work we were doing,
Right.
and partly because people were coming to Houston and the economy was picking up. So now the occupancy rate gets to 95%. And what Jessica's team has helped us do is to develop immediate solutions, midterm solutions, and long-term solutions. The immediate solutions is going to talk to landlords and saying, your 5%, we'd like those for our folks who are leaving homelessness. And it's very personal. You're touching them. You're saying, here's what we can give you. Here's the rent we can pay, and it's guaranteed. Here's the extra benefits through our landlord incentive fees, and here's the services that we're going to provide these tenants, which will be good for you.
Right.
And so that's the first thing we're doing. And it's difficult, but we have folks out there working with us and trying. And
it's always a long-term
landlords-
outlook. It's not.
And landlords saying, yes, we want to be part of the solution.
Wow.
Midterm, we're going to talk about midterm and long-term. Midterm.
Well, I would say you also, the way to get around NIMBYism is to look at properties that are already there serving multifamily.
Yeah.
So I think we also have to get bigger on, if someone, let's just say a city funder, a county funder is looking to invest in rehab a property, how do you put, requirements around who they serve for a portion of those units for a certain amount of time? So you're really locking in your units. I think we have to really, think through that. Bricks and sticks from the ground up takes,
That's long-term.
That's 3 years out,
Right,
if you're lucky
right. It's
to be able to get that
And you're
through.
fast at it here in Houston compared to places like Spokane that have a lot more zoning.
Yeah. But if you can get a for-profit even or a nonprofit developer to acquire and not have to go through traditional, if you can acquire a property without having to finance it, and then later on you own it, you can go to your finance and rehab package with governmental dollars.
Right.
It's a way to almost get around some of the NIMBYism, in my opinion.
And
We'll see how.
Maybe to jump on that is that there is a new navigation center being developed here, right? But it's being remodeled. It's not from the ground up, as
Yeah.
I understand it.
It's-
Cue 'em on that, and then the other one is, I just wanted to just ask the pure question: is if someone's in temporary housing, are you guys counting them as homeless or housed? Like, if you could just say that clear question, then we have that
We-
covered. So, let him ask that.
I think you answered the question.
You can start with that one, yeah.
Transition.
If
Yeah.
somebody's in temporary housing,
Transition
you count them as housed or not?
emergency
Yeah.
housing, just
Yeah.
so they'll
And what was the first one?
Navigation center. that
Navigation,
we created
yeah.
here, yeah. I mean,
Yep.
We don't.
Okay, I'm going to ask you that. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
I've gotten caught on this about 20 times. But as far as like temporary, the short-term, long-term, temporary housing, how do you label that?
You gotta just say if someone's in temporary housing, are they housed or not?
Okay.
Yeah.
Jessica, if somebody's in temporary housing, do you consider that housed?
No.
Okay.
No. So we do follow HUD's requirements and data standards, and we're pretty universal with it in how we report. If you're an emergency shelter or you're transitional housing, we count you as homeless.
Wow. So as far as the pipeline goes, and moving people, getting all the IDs, all the prep, coordinating benefits, and everything else, and that takes some time. Moving towards this long-term housing, but you got this interim step now that's being developed here in Houston. The navigation center sounds almost like a bridge. Maybe speak about that, or maybe not. What is that?
I wouldn't say it's a bridge. So the idea with the navigation center is a facility that people, as they're being housed, can stay there 30, 60 days as they're getting the paperwork ready. So you're moving from the street to a navigation center, where at that navigation center you're getting your paperwork ready. The other concept, it's a low barrier navigation center that you could bring your dog, you can bring your partner. There's a place for your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You can stay
So
there.
meeting people where they are.
You can stay there for the 24 hours, the whole time, as you're being completed your housing process. So it is not temporary housing. It's very much, and it's not a shelter. It's very much a place that you're navigated from the street to housing. And remember, part of the big issue is sometimes it takes a while to get all this done. And historically, people have been lost along the way. If you have to stay on the street 30, 60 days, things happen.
Right.
And so if they're in this navigation center, it's fine. We have a temporary center at an old motel. It's been successful. We're moving people through that. And we're excited about this permanent navigation center.
So the
We
temporary
hope-
has worked, and you're moving into a
We've-
permanent
I
one
think
now.
we could build 4 or 5. This is in an old school, and but it's an expensive process. It's not an inexpensive process.
I'm the biggest supporter of you will spend 10 times as much money if you invest in temporary solutions versus permanent solutions. It's just more costly.
That's simple.
And so that's what we've always done. I will say the navigation, one thing is I'm excited about is everyone who's there is on their way to housing. They have a referral, they have a navigator, they have a process in place. So it's not just saying we're going to put you here where you might be there for, 10 months while we wait for you to come up on the wait list. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be If you are there, you have a housing destination that we are helping you to achieve. And so I think that's one point of clarification that I think is very unique. It's also going to have some services on site to make sure we can meet people's, physical needs and everything like that. But I think that's the one big thing is shelter's so expensive.
Yeah.
Shelter is just...
It sounds expedient, but it's not expedient and it's not successful.
It's hard
and it
to
sounds
sustain.
very expensive.
It's hard to sustain like traditional emergency shelter.
And that's not intuitive. I mean, intuitively, you think the short-term solution is get them off the streets, but
Yeah.
that's not financially smart, and it
It's-
doesn't make sense long-term.
I am grateful to this team that when COVID hit, they said, we're going to put this money, this federal money, into housing programs. And we're not going to do what other cities are doing and put people in hotels. Now, it's complicated because you have to have people who do the navigation. You have to have professionals. There's an overhead to this. But in the short run, in the long run, it is more fiscally responsible.
And the city
to do
and the
this
county
system.
saw it that way, Mike?
It absolutely. I'm very indebted to them. When COVID hit, we got a call from St. Joseph Hospital. They had a homeless person leaving with COVID. They said they called and they said, "What can we do?" And I said, "That sounds like a healthcare problem." Called the public health authorities here, and they said, "We're overwhelmed. What, y'all do something?" The city and the county came together, and we started off with a testing program, another shelter, just in case as these other shelters tightened up.
Quarantine and
COVID
isolation
function.
facility.
And that's right. And we looked at it after a month and said, "This is really expensive. If we house people, we can do it a lot better." And that's when Jessica and her team put together this community COVID housing program phase 1, which was, I looked at it and went, there's a lot of people, a lot of moving parts, but we house people in
Right.
permanent supportive housing. That's the big step that the community has to make. And when they do that, they'll see it. When I was in Spokane last week, y'all have a huge number of service agencies in that one side of downtown. I mean,
Right.
there's a significant number.
Right.
The question I have for Spokane is, when you look at those dollars that you're spending with all those agencies, could it be more effective? Could it be more fiscally responsible and morally responsible to get people in supportive housing? You'd
Right.
still use the agencies, you'd still use the people, but you wouldn't have everybody lined up on the streets. They'd be in their units getting better.
I mean, this is similar to what you had 10 years ago.
What I would just say is, if we could back up and
Yeah.
get Mike's story about Spokane, like what the heck were you doing there?
Yeah.
You know, that connection to your daughter. And
Good,
I
good,
wish you
good.
Hear that. It really makes
Yeah, I was
me
gonna
feel-
swing. Yeah.
And then just honestly, what was your impression? Because
Yep.
our experience the last 3 days is we do not see the impact of homelessness, and we were searching for it.
Yeah.
The way you just instantly see it in Spokane everywhere. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's your experience, Mike, but it's been ours.
Yeah.
Hold on one second.
You bet.
We're
You
gonna
bet.
change the battery.
I'll start out with our own. search
Remember,
for-
Catherine, Sarah, y'all had some input for us?
Hey, this is great. I mean, that would do it for me.
Please,
Just
Catherine, you're always a
Spokane
good
time,
input.
great.
Speak up.
Yep.
You guys are awesome.
You guys are giving
This is
us.
amazing.
Yeah, this
Oh,
is
I was gonna
wonderful.
tell you,
Jessica.
the number of people permanently housed since 2012 are now more than 25,000.
That's
20.
great. I love
Let's
that.
go back
That's
and
what-
get
that's
that.
what it should be.
25,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or would probably like to say almost 26,000.
That's right. That's our.
How many
that's
years,
our-
Catherine?
Since
Since
2011.
20, we can, I was good, we did it, that's 2012. 2012.
So last 10 years.
Yeah.
And the other number I love, Gavin, is that there are more than 8,500 people who are housed at this moment in supportive housing here.
Wow.
And then you have to ask us how
This is a city
how
that's
it's
10 times
sustainable.
bigger than us.
You have to ask how it's sustainable.
Good one.
We're like over 3,000 square miles.
37. It's like
They're
the size
30
of,
some.
what,
Oh, yeah.
several
We can
cities.
send you that graphic. We have a great graphic that shows
Every
like,
city
how
that
many
fits.
big cities fit inside our
Fit inside
geographic
the
area.
geographic area.
Kevin, I don't know
Yeah.
anything about Spokane County.
Yeah, it's wild.
I don't know anything about Spokane
That would
County,
be
but
really
y'all have
cool.
a lot of
That would be.
good visual.
poverty in
Please do,
Spokane
yeah.
County.
Show that.
That's-
Oh yeah. Yeah, and the county and city aren't working together.
I mean, it's a,
Oh,
You
yeah.
know what I always wanted to
Yeah.
do in those kind of areas with so many service providers is every single service provider expands 2 levels up and has a supportive housing on the roof. You already get zoned for
you could do
You're
that.
already
'cause
zoned for
there-
supportive
there are a lot-
housing.
There are a lot of buildings
go
with,
up.
with service providers. And think
What
how
if, what if you had, mixed use? And
That's
you
cool.
and you started with mixed use for all the service providers who are already homeless service providers on that site. What NIMBYism are you going to get? Because they're already doing it.
Right.
Build up. That's what I
Just
would.
go up. Build
That's
up.
what I would do on the sites of all the nonprofits.
When you, again,
Right, they can
having
fill
just
that.
been in Spokane, it would be great because it's clear because everybody has their own nice building.
Well, I've always
That's
wanted.
brilliant, and you're right. It would get out, go right around NIMBYism because it's
I've always
already
thought
there.
about that and have
Yeah.
mixed use, mixed use buildings.
Yeah, and the other thing, you could, when you talk about the Spokane thing, is your experience with that is that we have come together and done big things. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of cool things have happened in our city. We have that in our DNA, I think. It's
Yeah, and Mike saw that too. So,
Right.
are we ready to go?
Yeah, give me a clap.
Yeah, you clap and start with what were you doing in Spokane, Mike?
Yeah. Housing search. So, we've been here. I've been here 3 days and looking all over for the homeless problem. And I actually had to look pretty hard. And we finally, Minute Maid Arena, finally found an encampment that really didn't look like our encampments in Spokane. But all in all, the visual, it's just dramatically different. And Mike, you've been to Spokane just recently. Your daughter is in the medical school, the WSU medical school.
Just last week I was in Spokane and
Yeah.
we did go around some of the encampments there because I'm interested in that.
Right.
And saw some of the service providers. My daughters who pushed me into this side of work. She was an outreach person in Seattle for elderly women who were experiencing homelessness. And she often would call me and yell at me about what kind of country did we leave her that let 90-year-old women sleep on the street. Anna is now a second-year medical student at Washington State and loving Spokane. She just thinks it's the greatest place in the world, the greatest city. And walking through Manitou Park, I can see why she thinks that. But one of the things I did see were so many service providers that had long lines of people outside, and I, asked Anna, "Do you have housing?" And she said, "No, there's not much housing available.
Right.
There's not much coordination between the city and the county, as there is in Seattle, and as there is in Houston." So I just see a great opportunity. Now I also see this when I went to Spokane, and you read the articles. It's one of the fastest growing places in the country. It is a place that people are driven to. My daughter's fiance has already brought 2 or 3 of his friends to live there. And they think it's the greatest place ever. But this is an opportune time for the city and the county to come together to begin solving these problems of homelessness and affordable housing, because the situation is only going to get worse and more expensive if they don't do it quickly and today.
We keep talking about this housing crisis, but you both make it sound like more of an opportunity. So, and as far as where you've arrived now, how many people have been housed in the last 10 years?
Over 25,000 people who were formerly homeless have been placed in supportive housing.
Wow.
Over the last, since 2011.
Supportive housing,
That's right.
long term. How many housed right now?
At this moment, there are more than 8,500 individuals who are in supportive housing.
Wow. And just to remind, the rough cost estimates, almost $100,000 if they were if they were living on the streets, less than $20,000 permanent supportive housing.
And it's interesting. People say,
Per
well,
person.
Per person.
Per person. It's
Per
interesting when people say, well, how's that sustainable? And the answer is the federal government has programs to sustain supportive housing. This year we will receive more than $45 million, and most of that will be directed towards sustaining those 8,500 people who are in housing for the support services, for the vouchers. And again, it's a sustainable program once you get it up and running. It does take the focus of the city and the county, local government. It takes the focus of philanthropy to say, let's invest in systems, not necessarily in each individual solution. Let's see if we can invest in the system. It takes the focus of businesses to see the big issue. And And I look at downtown Spokane and we actually looked at the pricing on buildings there, and
Right.
warehouses, and that's fairly inexpensive.
Mhm.
The day you house some of your homeless population and have them in housing instead of just being in encampments, the value of the downtown Spokane will increase tremendously, which increases the tax base.
It's a
And
win-win-win.
and on and on.
Right, right. Wow. So you've gotten to this place, you feel like it's a sustainable place. It's going to continue to get better.
I think so. I think we'll always have the philosophy, if I have $1 in front of me, how do I make it $2 with partners? And I think you gotta do it. And we gotta figure out, okay, we're given $45 million. How can we leverage that $45 million to get, 10 million in vouchers so it goes farther? It's like you have to stretch every penny you have and then figure out, just say it's never quite enough.
And in philanthropy, it works the same way. What's our number we say right now for every $1 given to the coalition?
We don't really have a super up-to-date number, but in 2019, it was for every $1 of private funding that the coalition needs to operate, we bring 37 public dollars into the community for our partners.
So there's kind of a leveraging going on, dollars coming into the coalition.
That's right.
What happens with a dollar coming in?
So it takes some money to run the operations here that government funding can't do. I think it's 11% of our internal budget it takes to run the operations here. All of that is philanthropy, but we think that system investment is what's brought in the $45 million of sustainable.
Wow.
The $50 million, $65 million in the COVID community housing phase 1. The hopefully $100 million in COVID community housing phase 2.
So every dollar coming in is creating a lot more to solve the problem.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we're giving people opportunities. As I said, we're giving landlords the opportunity to help house formerly homeless people. If you own apartments, you should feel it's your responsibility to get some people into housing. And we've done that, and we'll continue to work on that. You said, is it sustainable? Absolutely. Does it take work all the time? Absolutely. Does it take bringing in brilliant people to work in this? Absolutely. As we said before, we have really 2 boards. We have the 501c3 board, which is generally business people and people from the community who help sustain the financial viability of the coalition and the sustainability. They're the ones who will select the CEO every year. Then we have the COC steering committee, which is public funders, people in adjacent systems like criminal justice, healthcare, mental health care, and some folks also from philanthropy, people with lived experience, and people who represent the service providers. So these 2 boards have the consistent commitment toward this sustainability, and that's what it takes. It is not something you can go to sleep on.
Wow. Well, you've given us an amazing human roadmap, an amazing fiscal roadmap, and I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through this. Jessica, thank you so very much.
Gavin, thank you. I look forward to seeing you my next trip into
Yeah,
Spokane.
we can't wait to tell you what we do with all this. Thank you.
We hope you do it.
Thank you.
Do you want, just out of curiosity, do you want me to make a pitch for a 501c3 and not government?
Oh, no, you don't have to make that pitch. Well, let's do it on camera. Why? Because right now our COC, our collaborative partner, is the city, and it really mucks it up, and it needs to be out. Like, we need to switch it outside. So if you could give that pitch and we get that on camera.
Do you know how to ask that, Gavin?
I think I would just say the lead agency, government versus a nonprofit. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like
Yeah.
a nonprofit like a coalition. Okay. Just a final thought. As far as the lead agency goes, carrying all this out, should we be looking to government to do that, or would we be looking to something like 501c3 like the coalition? What's your thought on that?
I am so grateful for the folks who started this system and really built it up since 2011, that they chose a nonprofit to be the lead agency. And the reason is that as a nonprofit, we can pull together the county, the city, the state, and the federal government, and philanthropy, and service providers. We can pull that group together. I think if it was just the city doing it, or the county doing it, or the state doing it, you couldn't have that collaboration. There's too much jealousy, too much infighting. I am a believer in good government. So I believe that government works. Simultaneously, I believe that there are systems that could be better run with an entity working with government and for the multi-units of government. If Houston had a single government like Duval County, Jacksonville,
Right.
Nashville, Nashville, Tennessee, maybe you could do that. But the fact, if we hadn't been in the middle of this between the county and the city, we wouldn't have the success we've had, because they needed somebody in the middle to pull them together,
Create that
to have that
collaboration.
collaboration.
Well, sometimes government's paralyzed unless there's someone outside of them that can ask them to do something differently. And I think sometimes they're waiting for that someone to
That's a
ask.
great-
I think
Yeah,
sometimes
I
they're
agree.
saying it's hard for me to move unless someone asks. And sometimes government, if it's internal, they take the most conservative route.
Right.
And that's safe. But I think having a nonprofit is also saying sometimes government, our partners will someone say, ask us the question. Like,
Right.
ask it. Ask for what you want and let us think on it. But sometimes you just have to have that nonprofit that can do it. So I think it's good being positioned in
I'll
It's a
give you a
501c3.
great example of that Jessica's working on with youth homelessness. We received a significant federal grant to look at youth homelessness, and from that, we're starting to ask the youth, what do they want? How do they want their housing to look? How do they want their support to look? And if you look at government for that, through the foster system or adult protective system, they can't get out of their small little box.
Right.
And we're all very excited about what this Youth Development Fund will do and how it will change the homelessness features and the other features about people incoming into homelessness.
Yeah.
You guys get a YHDP grant?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and so did we, just got one. But
Yeah.
our city, so we basically, the COC board forced the city to give up management of it and took the YHDP money outside of the city, our planning money, and letting a nonprofit basically run the whole process so they could get, like, we just shut the city out even though they're our collaborative applicant.
Yeah. We actually we're submitting our CCP tomorrow.
Okay.
So yeah,
We
we
just approved ours today. That's
Yep. We just got our last signature yesterday. So we're submitting ours, but we got about a $10 million YHDP. We actually, as lead agency, have coordinated it all. So I think that's another thing is we've done all the stakeholder engagement around it. I think we had 75 like partner organizations, huge list, tons of participation, and it's been well received. But I think part of the thing is, again, I was saying that collective risk. When Harvey hit, the second Sarah was at the coalition and was able to say, hey, nonprofits, we need you at the disaster shelter tomorrow. People just showed up. They didn't ask. They're there. And then they're like, okay, now tell us what we have to do. And I think we've just kind of created that culture here where we all know we're in it together.
You gave each other cover.
Yeah, we give each other
I
cover.
love that risk analysis.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to recognize that we have great partners. The mayors of Houston, Mayor
Yeah.
Turner's been a wonderful partner. They have a homelessness liaison who we work with extremely closely. Mayor Parker was a great mayor. Mayor Turner's been a great mayor on this issue, very thoughtful. The
You've had long-term, steady leadership now, and that, of
the
course,
county
has
is
paid
more
off.
complicated because it's fairly decentralized. We have a strong mayor form of government. The county is fairly decentralized. We have asked them, and they have said yes to a homelessness liaison leader, and we don't have that yet. When we have that, we'll be very excited. It is necessary to have these governments very, very much up on point and in aligned.
But you help them do that. I mean, they've got a lot going on. I was in the city organization for 18 years, and what you said made a lot of sense to me. And it's a very low-risk organization. It's very hard for the city. They're designed not to take risks.
Yes,
And so
they are.
I love what you're
I
saying
love
about
that. That's
risk
just,
management.
that's a brilliant concept.
No,
It
I
really
just,
is, yeah.
I've been in government. I'm a horrible bureaucrat. I don't think I can go back. But people say like they're okay, they're open to different things, but they need to be asked to do it, or they will take the thing that'll pass their audit with flying colors.
Right,
And
right.
so you just have to say, and sometimes it's being able to interpret the regulations for people. Like government is underfunded a lot of times, at least here in Houston. They're short-staffed. And if you can do the research for them and say, hey, we pulled the regulations, we checked with HUD, you could spend your money this way, we can help you. Like, we can ensure that you're not returning the money by doing X, Y, and Z. Like, come along with us on the journey with us.
That's it.
And
Wow.
most likely we get a yes. Sometimes
Yeah.
we get a no, and that's okay.
But that's making it easy to say yes. Really
Yeah, but I
appreciate
was just
that.
saying, if you guys had one, last
Okay.
question, we've talked about this before, is your whole agreement, just wrap that up with the, it's not a money issue, it's an agreement thing, but if they had one thing, or two things, or each had one thing that we could do, what would it be?
Okay.
Just to start.
Well, I'm clearly hearing that it's not a money issue, but for us, it sounds like an agreement issue, getting everybody working together. But beyond that, are there any final pieces of advice for as we go back to Spokane?
The advice that I would give is don't be afraid. My wife asked me last night, she said, have you ever had 24 hours when you weren't afraid? One time. And I thought, I don't know if that's true or not. When I wake up in the morning and think about solving homelessness, the first thing I think about is don't be afraid. This can be done. This is not dangerous. This can be done. It is not impossible. And so I would tell the government officials, I'd tell the folks in philanthropy, don't be afraid. Just focus on housing people and everything will work out. That's what I would say.
That's the lesson from history.
What about you?
Jessica?
Don't get stuck on the perfect. Humans aren't perfect. A plan's not going to be perfect. If you're trying to strive for perfect, you're just going to never do anything. It's just try it and adjust and be okay with saying in the beginning, we're going to try something and we are going to monitor and we're going to course correct, but we're in this together. I think that's where people can, it's easier to disagree than to try. And I think you got to do it, and you got to just,
Yeah.
you got to do it.
Gotta do it. Gotta do it. Well, again, thank you.
I'm looking forward to what y'all have. Catherine, and Sarah, I
Thank you,
wish.
guys.
Yeah. I had troubles not applauding.
Well,
I love
this
you.
is-
Yeah,
I wish
amazing.
our staff had heard this.
Well, we're gonna put this, we wanna put this together as a full length.
But I wish our staff had heard this because